Hey, listen, is it right to use salt in your coffee instead of sugar? Find out here on Bean Basics. Oh, hey there. Welcome to Bean Basics with Bob and Michelle, and welcome to sunny Saugatuck, and welcome to the Obis Lab. Hey, listen, today we're talking about salt in coffee. Not that long ago, somebody wrote me and said, hey, Bob, is it okay to put salt in coffee? And frankly, I didn't really know the answer to that. So I started doing a little research, and what I found out is most recently, a chef by the name of Alton Brown said, yes, put salt in coffee. It'll make it taste better. It'll get rid of the bitter. And I really like that, because at BIGGBY we like to say we're serving coffee that's better, not bitter. Anyway, Alton Brown's idea is not certainly new. About a month ago, my mother said that her father used to put salt on the top of grounds before brewing his coffee. Did I know anything about that? And I really didn't. But come to find out that people have been doing it for years and years and years. I mean, the Scandinavians have been doing it, the Turks have been doing it, the Hungarians have been doing it. So there's folks out there that have been putting salt in their coffee. Pretty cool. But, you know, the first time I heard about the idea of salt in coffee, I was like, that sounds horrible. But I've tested it, and salt really does get rid of bitterness in coffee. And it might do a better job than sugar. So let me get started. We're going to run a small test. I've brewed some coffee already. It's just BIGGBY Best, and I've done it without salt. Our ratio, of course, is 30 grams of coffee to 500 grams or 500 milliliters of water, and we're going to do the same right now. So let me go ahead and grab my brew basket. And I've already got in the tank 500 liters of water. Now I'm going to add some coffee to the brew basket. But the thing to know is I overground this. In other words, it's too fine. In other words, I'm trying to make this bitter so that we can find out whether we can get rid of the bitterness. Now Alton Brown says put in a 1/4 teaspoon per, he says 6 tablespoons, but I figured out that came to about 30 grams of coffee. So let me go ahead and fire this up, and we'll talk a little bit more about salt in coffee. So just to keep in mind, you know, your tongue perceives a bunch of different flavor profiles like salt and sour and sweet and bitter and umami. Umami is a little bit like earth. And we talk about those like those are the ones. We think there's other ones too, like heat or piquant or astringency or maybe even pungency sometimes. I know that's an aroma, but aroma does affect taste, right? Now, the science of adding salt goes something like this. Regular table salt, not with any iodine in it or anything like that, is sodium chloride, okay? And when sodium passes across, or when sodium ions pass across your tongue, it actually blocks the reception of bitterness on your tongue. Pretty remarkable. Now, you know, one of the reasons I was skeptical about the idea of taking bitterness out of coffee is, hey, if your coffee's bitter, you have some other things to fix. Like maybe you got to fix your grind, or maybe you're buying bad coffee and that kind of thing, right? But sometimes there are bitter components in coffee. And one of them, by the way, is caffeine. Caffeine is naturally bitter. But with coffee, you know, we like some sweetness, we like some sour, we like some acid in there, we like some oils in there. But just like with chocolate, or maybe even some beers like an IPA, some bitterness is expected and wanted, right? So the question is, do we want to mute all the bitterness? Maybe not. Maybe not. So here's all the things that sodium does when you add it to a cup of coffee. First of all, it does what we just talked about, and that is it neutralizes the bitter flavor. The other thing it does is salt, when you add it to your brew basket like this, and the water sort of runs through a little bit, salt takes stale water and makes it not stale. And sometimes in a Cuisinart like this, a 10-cup brewer, sometimes the water gets trapped and there can be a little bit of stale water. The other thing is it makes the water more dense or thicker, and so you have a different mouthfeel on your tongue. The other thing is that salt will also bring out the natural flavors of coffee. Now think about that, right? So for example, at BIGGBY, we serve a salted caramel latte. Why do we put salt on there? Because that salt accentuates the caramel and the sweetness even more. So there's some other benefits to salt. The other thing is we think salt can actually replace sugar. Now that was way beyond what I thought could be the truth, but it's possible. The other thing is that coffee has a lot of magnesium in it, and it has a lot of antioxidants. And sometimes when we put cream and sugar in a coffee, we actually mitigate those things, right? So that magnesium, those antioxidants are really good for us, okay? But then we pile on all this stuff, and it can kind of make it maybe bad for us. The last thing is that when you drink coffee naturally, you lose some sodium, right? Coffee's a diuretic. And so you'll pass sodium through your body, so adding a little sodium to your cup does replace that sodium too. Okay, now, you know, coffee is never meant to make you grimace, right? So you want a little bit of bitters in it, but you don't want it to be like, when you drink it, right? Now I've brewed it so, because the grind is so fine, that it will make me grimace a little bit. But it sounds like our batch is ready. Let me go grab that, right? So we've got the salted version right here. We've brewed them the same, and the unsalted version. The grind was the same, the water proportions were the same, and the coffee proportion is the same. So I'm going to pour a little bit of BIGGBY Best here. And it's still smoking hot. I did it just before we started the show. And a little salted BIGGBY Best, both over extracted basically. And I'm going to take a sip of each. All right, first the unsalted. That does happen to be very bitter, right? I ground that so fine. Okay, with salt. So believe it or not, there's zero bitterness in here. Now the trade-off is it does taste a little salty, right? And you might consider that awkward, right? But when you add sugar, and I'm going to add some sugar right now to the one that, and let's see if the sugar, I'm going to add 3 cubes of sugar. Let's see if the sugar can mitigate the bitterness as well as the salt does. But you know, when we add sugar, we definitely have an aftertaste of sugar when we're done also, right? So is it bad to have an aftertaste of salt? I don't know the answer to that. Okay, so I'm going to take my over-extracted BIGGBY Best with sugar. And it's less bitter, but there are some bitters left. No bitter, but I have a salty aftertaste. All right, well, I've shared everything I know about salt in coffee. Is it appropriate to use salt instead of sugar? It could be. You know, one of the ways that it might work out for you is if you cannot have sugar. Perhaps you're a diabetic and you want to take away some of the bitterness. Maybe you're trying to do some weight loss and cream and sugar doesn't sound like a great idea. Maybe you're just ready to try something new. Now, for me, I drink my coffee black. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I don't put cream or sugar, and I'm probably not going to start putting salt in it either. All right, that's all we have time for. But let me leave you with one last thing. When you love the world will love you right back. Hey, thanks for joining us. For future episodes, click the subscribe button. Being Basics is brought to you by OneBigIslandInspace.com with 2 G's.